the Jazz, Utes, Cougars, or Aggies, these guys have got you covered.
Time to eat, fellas.
You're locked on to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
1, 2, 3, move it.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Want to remind you about the Hercules Hero of the Week. Nominate the youth sports volunteer you know for the Hercules Hero of the Week. Submit your nomination at kslsports.com/contest and listen every Thursday afternoon to JJ and Alex for the winner. Help us celebrate the efforts of those volunteers making an impact with the Hercules Hero of the Week, sponsored by Hercules First Federal Credit Union and Beehive Meals. Also want to remind you about Sound Sleep Medical. Join Hanson Scotty coming up today from noon to 3 at Sound Sleep Medical, 8941 South, 700 East in Sandy.
Can I ask you another question about Quinn, or are we beating this horse today?
I told you, I like talking about Quin Snyder in hindsight. I find it fascinating. I find him fascinating. Frankly.
I do. I think he's a fascinating character.
Not necessarily in like I find Teddy Roosevelt fascinating kind of way, but yeah.
Oh, he was very relevant to your and my life.
For a long time.
Just had to be. I mean, I talked to him 5 times a week for a stretch. You know, I would talk to him every day throughout COVID. It's just like a weird person to exist in my life. Do you think he left meat on the bone with the teams he coached?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have an example where you think it was most apparent?
They were better than the Clippers minus Kawhi Leonard in the second round of the playoffs.
And I think that's the one everyone would point to. And I think that's a huge question.
I'd point to at least one of the series against Houston.
Okay.
At least one, if not both the series against Houston.
How much were they up over Denver?
They were up 3-1
Denver
over Denver.
in the bubble, absolutely. Meat on the bone.
And look,
having the number 1 seed, though, and going out in the second round of the Clippers, where the Clippers tanked the end of the year to get that matchup. Yeah, that's leaving meat on the bone.
And there is context around all of this.
That's nobody believed in you because you were fake, and then they proved it.
Mike Conley gets hurt in the last game of the win over the Memphis Grizzlies. He hurts his hamstring and is basically entirely unavailable against the Clippers in the round that they lose. 3-1 against the Nuggets. They are playing with Bojan Bogdanovic. Mike Conley leaves in the middle of COVID because his wife has a baby. He misses at least 1 game and maybe 2. They even might have won one of them, though, that he wasn't out. So there are areas where there was meat on the bone where the Jazz did not fulfill the opportunity that was in front of them, but there is context that they were always missing bodies at that point too.
I talked to people over there who would say that to me until they were blue in the face, and all that stuff is true. And there is a fine line between an excuse and a reason because they are basically the same thing. But those are a lot like armpits, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
We all have them, and they all stink.
Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard got hurt when they were down in the series.
Yeah.
I mean,
it may have been 2-2 when he got hurt, but regardless, their best player went out, and the Jazz lost a game 6 at home against the Clippers here in Salt Lake City because Paul George went off and they couldn't stop him.
You know what? I will add this. The Jazz collapsed in a playoff series. Granted, it was the Mickey Mouse playoff series against Denver. They collapsed because Donovan Mitchell got an 8-second call in the backcourt, and that team came apart at the seams. I remember that postgame vividly, where Donovan Mitchell was shaken by the fact that he let his team down over the stupidest thing in the history of basketball.
Yep.
It was truly a Chris Webber moment.
Yeah.
And they never recovered. They never recovered. They lost the series because they couldn't get it together. Ben, what was Phil Jackson's superpower? It wasn't the triangle offense. It was that he got his team through it.
Yeah, he could get it back together.
He could get it back together. He could
Dennis
use
Rodman
different
disappears
ways.
to Vegas. He can get it back together.
Absolutely. That was an example of a team that could not get it together, and you could argue that the team couldn't get it together from that point forward. Actually, I wouldn't, because the next year they rattled off that long streak where they were just crewman team, so that's certainly unfair. But like the end of the Donovan Rudy era was a team that couldn't get it together. You yourself called it broken.
Yeah, it was toxic.
It's your job as a coach not to let that happen. I don't care. I don't care what the circumstance is. Rudy shut the world down with a virus, and gave it to his teammate in theory. You know?
Right. At least that was the narrative.
Right. That's a tough one. I'll grant you. That's a hard one. But it's your job to put it back together. And you can be the evil genius of X's and O's all you want. But if that isn't in place, you're going to lose. Because Phil Jackson was not an evil genius when it came to X's and O's. Far from it. At most, he stole an offense from somebody else and kind of implemented it.
Yeah.
Jeff Van Gundy famously said, "You want me to tell you what the triangle offense is? Give it to number 23. He was not an evil genius, but he could figure out a way to get the most volatile personalities on the planet on the floor at the same time, pulling in the same direction. Kobe and Shaq hated each other. So much so he wrote a book about it. Phil Jackson did, which is still hilarious.
Right.
And then was able to still coach Kobe Bryant. Can you imagine that?
And win.
That's a huge part of coaching. You know, we talk about wits all in or in the way kind of thing. He's trying to get 100 dumb young people on the same page, motivated to do a really hard thing. That's the job. And I think they hid from it instead of dealing with it. And I think maybe that was his flaw that we're talking about. But not surprising, by the way, I told you the C. Banks guy that called me the worst sports talk radio guy in the state of Utah and then hit me with the clown emoji. Yeah, you know what his profession is? He's a coach. Like, he's Farmington's director of football operations. He was Farmington High football coach for 3 years or something like that. Like, he's a coach. Coaches are weird.
Coaches are a very specific breed of people, and they all have something in common.
But they're all overly sensitive. They're all super in their feelings and sensitive about people telling them that they're wrong. And I don't know if it's the types of personality that the profession. I don't know if it's the pressure. But there's a reason that the what do they call it with cops? The blue wall, where cops won't talk about each other because it's blue. There's one of those in coaching.
There is.
That you cannot talk about another coach.
In a certain way.
You can't.
Yeah.
They won't do it. It's breaking the rules. All the coaches will tell you about it. The reason that Sean Payton apologized for calling Nathaniel Hackett an idiot was not because he was wrong. It was because he broke the rule.
Yeah, he broke the code.
He broke the code. He broke the rule. How dare you question? And I think the answer is because a lot of coaches don't know what they're doing, and they're not infallible, and they're super sensitive about it. But they have to get people to trust their decision making to accomplish whatever their goal is. So how dare some idiot bozo talk about me on the radio or talk about coaches this way? I love the sentence. I'd like to see you do it.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'd like to see you do a 4-hour radio show. The answer is you can't.
I think.
And then criticize me. You know what I mean?
Sure, I do. I think part of it comes from, and I want to keep moving on this conversation, but I think part of it comes from the fact that we base coaches on their decision makings filtered through the actions of other people. And I'm sure coaches feel very, very strongly unarmed by it, I guess is the word, unempowered by it. You can have a perfect game plan, and if the guy does the wrong thing, you get blamed for it. It's like, no, I did my job right, and Royce O'Neal was in the wrong spot, or Ricky Rubio did something wrong, or Donovan Mitchell didn't give any effort defensively on this possession, which was the only possession of the game he needed to try, and he still didn't try. And you're blaming me for it. So I think that's part of where coaching frustration comes from. But when it comes to leaving meat on the bone or underachieving with Quin Snyder, I think one of the big things that we've looked at that is probably altering our perspective on Quinn is that Donovan Mitchell is right now on the best team in the NBA and is the best player on that team. And that Rudy Gobert went and won another Defensive Player of the Year award with another team and got to the conference finals, which he'd never done in Utah. And I think there are fans listening right now, Jazz fans specifically, that will probably say, yeah, but the Jazz didn't have X, Y, and Z next to him. Or, next to that Donovan Mitchell has, whether it's an Evan Mobley or whatever. Or, Donovan Mitchell, if you're a Rudy apologist, which is great, Rudy didn't have Anthony Edwards or Jaden McDaniels or some of these other guys. And again, all of this context certainly matters. But I do think it's interesting that both of those guys have gone on, and Donovan hasn't yet. Donovan hasn't gotten out of the second round yet. He made it to the second round last year with Cleveland, but didn't get past it. I'll be curious if Donovan's actually different this year in the playoffs because, again, he's the best player on the best team in the NBA, which we saw firsthand. 2020, 2021, is that the year? He was the best player on the Jazz. Maybe you could argue Rudy, but Donovan was the leading scorer on a team that finished with the best record in the NBA, which is where the Cavs are headed. And I want to see if the Cavs can get more out of him in the postseason than the Jazz were able to. And then how much meat was actually left on that bone. I'm curious. I don't know.
I still don't think Donovan can carry a team to a championship, but I don't. The question with Cleveland is he going to have to carry it? But if he tries, they're going to lose. He's just not. I mean, if he were 6'8", maybe that'd be a different story.
Sure.
But I just don't think he's that kind of player. But I get your point that you're making about both Rudy and Donovan. You know, we all relish the story about Shandon Anderson being so great, and then as soon as he was out of Jerry's tutelage,
He was awful.
he was terrible and out of the league.
Yeah.
You know, like we all love that story. And I don't know, I don't know if it's true or not. The Athletic piece that was released during COVID, the headlines were all about Rudy and Donovan's relationship, and the story was all about that. But the headline was all about what did Donovan say?
Unsalvageable.
Unsalvageable.
Yeah.
Lost in the detail, there was an anecdote from an unnamed source. And by the way, I know Sam Amick, who was basically reporting that story really well, and I don't like unnamed source reporting very often. But I actually know that guy, know Sam, and
Unnamed source reporting is critical. So, yeah.
And he talked about how they would put Rudy into situations that Rudy would fail, that they did that on purpose to shut Rudy up.
To humble him.
Because Rudy was crying in the media about not getting the ball enough and not scoring enough or whatever, because he was trying to get his max contract extension. And he did it with Andy, right? Fed that story to Andy, not at practice, but fed it to Andy off whatever, and not Jazz sanctioned or whatever, went outside the walls to cry about not getting the ball enough 9 games into the season. And so they threw balls at his feet, and they threw passes that he couldn't handle, and they did all this to basically humble Rudy. As a coach, you cannot let that is a fail. That is why they failed. You can be the best X's and O's coach on the planet, and you ain't getting over that. Ben, if I purposely submarined you on this show because, I don't know, you said something during a break that bugged me, and I decided to, purposely put you in a bad, humiliating position, our show is over.
Agreed.
You know what I mean?
So you better not.
It may be later rather than sooner.
Yeah.
But as soon as you cross that line,
there is a line you can't cross.
It's over. It's over. And honestly, there's a reason I wouldn't cross that line, because we're on the same team. That's
right.
We're out for success. Your failure is my failure. My success is your success. That's why we trust each other. That's why we trust Christian. And if that fails, if Christian somehow submarines either of us because he's like, Cheddar Dune is mine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's not going to succeed. And he would take us down with him because that's not how it works. It's the same thing with basketball. It's the same thing with any team. It's the same. My wife has a team of people that she works with on the legal side of her company. If you're submarining other people on your same team, you are going to fail. So that's a coach's failure. That's if
you can't prevent that.
If you can't prevent that, that's a failure. If I actually did that to you, Ben, it would, believe it or not, be Lloyd's failure just as much as mine, if not more.
If it was something we could see happening repeatedly, yes, and Lloyd didn't step in and he's our boss, then yes. I agree with you. I will say this. And look, this is just the nature of our business. We compare the new thing to the last thing, and we compare players, et cetera, et cetera. We always do it. There is and it's circumstances are different, expectations are different, but there is a cohesion right now in the Jazz locker room, and I think it's because of Will Hardy, that I don't know if I ever felt during the Quin Snyder era.
Okay. Okay, I could buy into that.
Because-
I mean, I don't know.
Now, look, there is not a Donovan Mitchell on this
It's a
roster
different dynamic.
where
Yeah.
it felt like really quickly the clock was ticking with Donovan Mitchell. Really quickly that came to light. That it's New York. At some point, he's going to end up in a different city, and it's probably New York, and there's reasons he's going to get there. And that might have been Donovan Mitchell's failure, but it absolutely permeated and grew and grew and grew, and nobody figured out how to stop that. And look, there might be guys in the Jazz locker room who do feel that way, and maybe because they're not winning or because there's nobody in the conversation to win Rookie of the Year, Keontae George didn't get there. We don't get that sense of the Jazz are going to be ripe for the picking in a couple of years when someone wants to play in a bigger market. But I do feel like there is a hold the line, through line with this team that is stronger than maybe it was when the Jazz had Donovan and Rudy here. And maybe that's just because they're not winning, so it doesn't matter who comes and goes because everyone's tradable. And it could be as simple as that.
I don't know. I think it's almost impossible to compare. I mean, Lowry is a different type of best player, which makes it totally different. Yeah. But I was just, if that is true, then I think it's because Will Hardy is actually a person.
I think it comes, and that's where I do think it's important. I think it comes back to Will Hardy's humility that does trickle down through everybody there on the team.
There's more than one way to get buy-in, and I would argue that some are more sincere than others, and that would inspire, I think, more ultimate success. But I'll tell you what, the people that inspire through fear and that sort of thing have won plenty of championships. So
yes. There's not a right way to do it. There's a lot of different ways to win. And by the way, all of Quinn, not all of them, but Quinn's players loved him.
Yes, because he never told them no. And I think that also is a problem with Quin Snyder. He never wanted to have a hard conversation with his players, from what I could tell. And his players would say that, he had plenty of hard conversations.
I'm sure he would say he did too.
But he didn't, because the bad habits that were all over that team never got fixed. Rudy, if he really wanted to score, was never told, well, you need to develop an offensive game, and here's how we're going to help you do that. He was never told that. He was told, we'll draw up some more lobs for you at the rim or something like that. I keep coming back to the moment where Will Hardy pitched his offense last year. And not that he just did it, because I think that says something, but that he told you about it. He wasn't afraid of the narrative. He wasn't afraid of being called a bad coach. He wasn't afraid of any of that. He told you about it. And that's a guy that will have an honest conversation with you because he's being honest with himself. Quin Snyder never wanted to tell Jay Crowder to stop shooting. He never did. Because a coach with some humility would pull the guy over aside and say, Jay, listen, I'm not a perfect coach, and I'm going to try and put you in better positions to succeed, but you're embarrassing yourself. And you're embarrassing this team, and you need to stop. I've never seen a worse shooter with more gall in my entire life.
I think you're going to see a lot of fans. I'm just predicting a narrative. You're going to see a lot of fans get frustrated with how Will Hardy handles Bryce Sensabaugh because there's going to be some really quick slaps on the wrist. There's going to be a game in the next month where Bryce plays 11 minutes, and people are going to be like, he just scored 34 in Miami on the road and won the game, and then scored 27 in Orlando. What happened? And it's the willingness to have a tough conversation, even when a guy is rolling, that Will has really done a lot of, and maybe has done it more obviously than Quinn has. Because, I'm sure Quinn had them, but you're bringing up examples of where a tougher conversation might have been beneficial. And I think there are examples of Will clearly doing it, and he does it by sending messages on the court, on the floor, benching guys, not playing guys at all, putting them in the G League, whatever it is, saying you need to be better, otherwise you're not going to play. And it does rile fans up. It does frustrate them. But I think it's an example of what you're talking about, having these types of tough conversations.
I mean, ironically, the only player he truly probably put the reins on was Donovan Mitchell.
Quinn.
Mm-hmm. Because I do think Donovan was not a stat packer when he was here. I think he could have averaged more points if he would have played differently, excluding the fourth quarter. Because I think Donovan, not for stat reasons, but for glory reasons, wanted to take over in the fourth quarter. He always wanted to do that, and he did. But he could have played that way the whole game if he really wanted to. And he bought into the system, and he passed more than probably he had to. And we're seeing that in Cleveland, where he can do whatever he wants in Cleveland, and his stats have shot through the roof.
Yeah.
It's not a surprise to me.
It's also important that he's done less this year and they've been better.
But, I mean, I just can't imagine. Like, Jordan Clarkson was a better player under Will Hardy than he was when he won the Sixth Man of the Year.
His first year under Will.
His first year under Will. Because Will had a hard conversation with him and said, you can't play like that. You've got to be a playmaker. Do you want to start in the league on this team? Well, you're going to be a playmaker and you're going to move it. And he had his best year, in my opinion. And then the team has gone, the talent level has dropped, and Jordan is, actually understandably, gone back to his previous habits because that's what's going to keep him in the league. See our conversation yesterday about the shoot it all the time sixth man that everybody thinks he is, because
That's what he's doing.
That's what he's doing.
Yeah.
So I would argue he's a worse player today than he was 2 years ago because he reverted back to Quin Snyder, Jordan Clarkson. Because that bad habit was enabled, not corrected or helped. But I don't know. Quin Snyder is the coach of the Hawks, and I'm some bozo sitting here getting yelled at by Farmington's director of football operations.
He really hit you in the feels today. He's straight shot. He really
No, it's
gut
just
shot
like
you out of nowhere.
sometimes you just really are reminded how inconsequential you are. You know?
May we never forget it.
No, I'm total bozo to genius scale with me. I'll tell you, I'm like 90% bozo.
Yeah, we all are. That's how you get this job.
Stay tuned. More next. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
This is Hans Olsen and Scotty G. It's what you want.
You know, I was babysat until 8th grade. Dolores Arnold used to babysit me every day after school. And
Dolores?
her husband, yeah.
Like how you got like 220-pound 8th grade hands.
Can we not focus on that?
You walk in like, hey, Dolores. Hi, Hans. I think it's funny the thought of a 8th grade Hans Olsen probably pushing 2 bills, sitting in and being babysat.
You guys let me know when you're done so I can finish my story.
Tell us more about Dolores.
Anyways, her husband, Don, liked MASH.
Sitting next to Don on the couch watching MASH.
Hey, Don, can I borrow your shaver?
Catch Hans and Scotty weekdays from noon to 3 on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Who's got it better than us?
Your home for the best sports coverage in Utah. You're listening to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
It's a Jazz Ticket Tuesday. Caller number 12 right now, 801-575-ZONE. You're going to get a pair of tickets to go see the Jazz and the Heat coming up this Thursday at Delta Center. So the revenge game, Ben. The Heat back in town. We'll see if they're any better than they were the first time, which wasn't great. Let's talk about the Hawks on the floor. We can talk about the game.
Okay.
The actual.
I'm knee deep in Quin Snyder lore now. I'm reading an old Jeff Pearlman article. Jeff Pearlman's a genius in my opinion. Speaking of the word genius, but actually he does bring that up. He in this article he says this is a Quin quote. He says, "I was called the smartest guy in the gym, and I never thought that way about myself. I was called one of the hottest young coaches in America, and I was called a terrible coach. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle."
He stopped saying stuff like that when he got to Utah.
He kind of just stopped talking about himself. He really did not ever. He wouldn't tell us what book he would read. He's like, I don't want to be analyzed. Just fine.
It's because he's paranoid.
Yeah. Anyways, okay. Back to the Hawks on the floor.
Paranoid people are often hiding things.
I don't know. Whatever. He has a right to privacy.
No. I don't mean hiding things like that did not come out the way that I meant it. Not hiding things like he's a serial bank robber or something. No, like hiding like insecurities.
Sure.
The fact that you're not a genius. But anyway, on the floor. So you were telling me you think 18-18 is good for this Hawks team.
I think it's probably about where I would peg them. And if you were to get the most out of them. Because there were a lot of people projecting early in the season that the Hawks were going to be one of the 5 worst teams in the NBA. And they are not. They are absolutely not. They are very likely to make the play-in tournament in the Eastern Conference. And if you said that they took a team to 6 games in the playoffs in the opening round, I think that's adequate. And they're doing it with maybe the most flawed player in the NBA, who's still really good in Trae Young.
Flawed, yes. Good, I don't know. But I do know that he's playing a little bit differently this year. His usage rate is down. His assists are up, which is kind of a funny thing to say because assists are part of usage rate.
Yeah.
But I think you get my point. He's involving maybe his teammates a little bit more, but I don't know. Like they're in the wrong spot as a franchise, obviously, because they're in the middle and not going anywhere, and yet somehow excused. But I like Jalen Johnson as a player.
Jalen Johnson's great. He's maybe the most underrated player in the NBA. He's their Colin Sexton. Now, he's a forward.
Right.
He's not a guard, but there's
Energy
a real
guy.
argument that, like, every night he's the most consistent player.
He's 20 and 10.
Yeah, he's really awesome.
19.8 points per game, 10 rebounds.
Yeah. No, he's awesome. He's a great player.
So that player and Trey Young, you're cool with 18 and 18. That's a good job.
Well, again, Trey is truthfully
maybe
the
it
worst
is. I don't know.
defensive player on the planet. Like, he is so bad defensively because he's 5'5". He's bigger than that, but he weighs nothing. You're constantly at a disadvantage with him on the floor physically. And so the fact that they aren't 30th in defense is a testament.
Why is he still on the team? And I mean that I'm
Trey?
open-ended. Yeah, why is he still on the team?
I do think he's got a little bit of the Bradley Beal thing where the rest of the league realizes, like, he just caps you.
You could fool the Lakers into taking him.
Maybe. That was kind of the rumor in the offseason, and they didn't do it.
You can fool somebody. I mean, I'm picking on
I
the
would
Lakers.
think so.
But,
I think they do want to get a lot back for him.
I mean, the Wizards got rid of the old maid. Like, anything's possible.
They do want to get something back for him, and probably quite a bit. I mean, what we have to realize is the Wizards got Chris Paul back for him, who they flipped Chris Paul for Jordan Poole, who's awful too. You know what I mean? Like, they traded one old maid for another, in all honesty, and the Wizards ultimately did. But they got rid of the worst one.
Well, in this theory of conversation, people still think Trae Young is good. He wouldn't necessarily be the old maid. And his contract isn't nearly as bad as Bradley Beal's. He's going to make $45.9 next year and then a player option for $48.9 the year following. It wouldn't surprise me if that actually option did not get picked up based on where salaries are going.
Yeah, but they would love to trade him. I really do believe that.
I don't know if I think they would have done it.
And they have
I think they're
kicked the
talking
tires. They moved off of DeJounte Murray, which has not been a huge success with the Pelicans, though Zion Williamson is back as of tonight officially. So we have not seen that team at full strength yet. They've made some mistakes. They were poorly managed. They have a not effective owner. But again, they traded for DeJounte Murray, like when they already had Trae Young. And I get that why people thought that would be successful, and I can't even remember my thoughts on it at the time, but it was a horrendous trade. They took a bath on that trade. They gave up a bunch of future picks and swaps. I mean, they made like a Donovan Mitchell, not quite, but a Donovan Mitchell type, we're going to give you all the picks that we have trade to get DeJounte Murray, and he didn't do anything there. It was a bad matchup with he and Trae, but I think Trae is the best of these types of players we've talked about, which just don't actually win at the highest level and can't win at the highest level. But he's amazing to watch on a game-to-game basis.
Okay, yeah.
Like, you just can't win with Trae as your best player. And wherever he goes, because of the style of play he has, because his usage rate is through the roof, you can't escape it. You can't ask him to take a smaller role, because then he's not going to be effective, and then you're really at a disadvantage. So you have to empower him so much, but you're capped because of it.
What if you keep him because you actually don't want to be good?
I would hope that they were worse than 18 and 18 then, if that was the case.
No, not trying to lose, just trying not to be good.
So, like, don't raise any eyebrows? Like, don't be noticed?
Don't raise any expectations.
Sure.
What was probably the beginning of the end for Mike Budenholzer in Atlanta?
Yeah, they started winning.
They won.
Yeah. And then the
expectations went through the roof.
The same thing with Milwaukee. Yeah.
What if you just stayed good, not great forever?
You just want to stay in the middle.
Honestly, that's the criticism of the Jazz. Why is the Jazz a good job, or was traditionally? Because they're never going to fire you. And you can be good, not great.
Yeah.
And they're never going to fire you. And that's a bit unfair to Jerry Sloan because he absolutely raised the bar for himself.
Yeah, he
and then took another version of the team back to the Western Conference Finals. So I don't necessarily think that was Jerry's mentality. But you can be good. You can be mediocre and keep a job in Atlanta for 10 years. In fact, winning in Atlanta probably does you a disservice because you can't win long-term in Atlanta because of all the stuff we've talked about.
So the second you set that expectation,
you
set the clock.
It's over.
Yeah.
The beginning of the end for Bronco. Bronco Mendenhall had the perfect job at UVA. Perfect. He didn't have to really win anything. He was making ACC money. Nobody cared. I'll be taking a nap in my office.
Yeah, but you go to the Orange Bowl.
All of a sudden you're expected, whoa, hey
get back
here. Wow, okay. It is possible to win a football game at UVA. What do you know? And then you kind of go back to your comfortable ho-hum, and then you're on your way out because all of a sudden there's a big expectation set. You know what I mean?
I will dismiss some of what you're saying just because I think at the NBA, to get to that level, you have to be so competitive, et cetera, that, like, I have a hard time imagining a lot of people want to go and disappear in the NBA. Like, you don't accidentally get to the league. However, I will say, and this is from my personal experience, and again, I'm reading this Jeff Pearlman article, this old one on ESPN about Quinn. I truly think probably the happiest he was ever in his life was when he was an anonymous head coach with the Austin Toros, making $75,000 a year. Because what was their pressure to do?
Nothing.
You don't have to win. You have to coach. And I think Quinn truly loves being a coach. Like, I really do. I think he loves the project of it. I think he likes putting together a game plan. I think he likes the math aspect of it. And I don't even just mean the math is a bad word because he's such an analytics guy. It's going to draw that comparison. The formulaic aspect of the job. I think he likes the idea of let's mix and match these integers and see what happens. These variables and see what works and see what the outcome is. I think he loves that. So I think he really does like coaching. So maybe in a sense there is this, hey, I don't have to go and talk to the New York media or the Philly media or wonder why I'm not winning titles with Giannis. That I have a little more freedom in Atlanta that I actually have realized in my career I value. Because when I had it in Austin, that's when I was at my happiest. I would believe some of that. Now, do I think he wants to win? Yes. Do I think he's just trying to hide and milk a paycheck as long as possible? No. Do I think he likes a little bit lower pressure situation? Maybe.
Does he want to win? I don't think that's his number one priority, no.
Well, again, to this point, when he took the Atlanta job, and I'd have to go back and look exactly at what jobs were going to become available.
Milwaukee was one.
Milwaukee was going to be one. The Lakers was going to be one.
Yeah.
There was at least one other that was like a good job that was coming up. The rumor was he took the Atlanta job because Pop indicated he was not going to retire. And people thought he would retire and then Quinn could go to San Antonio. By the way, you go to San Antonio, what does that allow you to do? Kind of coach without major expectations. Despite the fact that they had won several titles, when he would have taken over the team was pre-Victor Wembanyama. There was no expectations on that team. So that could apply there. But there were good jobs that were open. Maybe even Brooklyn. Brooklyn might have been with KD and Kyrie, might have been opening at that point as well. I can't remember exactly, but there were a lot of good jobs with the idea of a championship ceiling that he passed on to take an Atlanta Hawks job early in the process.
I think his priority is he wants to do it his way. I honestly,
that might be.
I
might
think
be the
that's
case.
his priority. I don't think it's to win. I think it's to have a job, do it his way. Nobody's going to bother him, and he's going to keep that job until he's done with it or it's done with him. I think, like, why didn't Rick Majerus leave Utah?
Because he could do it his way. And there was no bright spotlight on him.
And he got tagged as the coach that took the ragtag bunch to
the Final Four.
The Final Four.
Yeah.
He didn't even have to win it.
Yeah.
Blew the finals, in fact. Blew it.
Yeah.
But if you do that at Kentucky, then you go down as the GOAT. Meaning the GOAT like
The bad goat,
not GOAT good.
Greatest of all time.
No, GOAT like you get fired GOAT.
And, this is a common thing people do. There are people who leave the height of something or don't want to be the star of ESPN because they'd rather have their own show privately. There are people, I'm sure we have listeners who have...
I'm not even faulting.
Oh, no,
I'm just
not
saying.
at all. No, I'm trying to think of how to apply it to normal life because coaching is not normal life. There are people who leave probably higher paying jobs at a business that brings more... is a fancier part. You go to fancier parties to go say, no, I'm going to run my own business. I'm going to be my own guy, but at least I'm in control. And I might not make as much money, and I might not be invited to the same parties or get the same bonuses, but I'm happier because I'm in control. And I get to make decisions that I don't get to make in other areas. And that is satisfying for some people, and that could apply to Quinn. I would listen to that.
Some people get into sports radio because they think they're going to be famous.
Uh-huh.
If that were my goal, I'm trying to trying to apply it to me. But if my goal was to be famous or to be a star, I never would have stayed in Salt Lake City.
Sure.
Not that I ever would have made it. I'm not saying that.
Right,
I'm not
right.
saying that I have that sort of capability.
Sure.
I'm just saying if that were my goal, my life's goal was to be famous, I never would have stayed in Salt Lake City.
Right.
But it's way more complex than that. I have other priorities, and I've been blessed to stay here for my entire
You value
career.
the other things that you get out of being here.
I get to do my own show, meaning like we have an incredible editorial and content control.
Yeah.
We get to do the show that we want to do.
Yeah.
I had control over programming for a long time. Like there are things that I really value, let alone, that this place is my home.
Sure.
But if I wanted to be a star and that was my priority, I would not have stayed in Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
If Quin Snyder's priority is to win a championship, he never would have taken the Atlanta job.
Probably not. You're right.
So I don't think winning is his priority. No. And that's fine. But I don't think winning is his priority.
And it's funny to bring this up because these two are tied together. I think being a star was Donovan Mitchell's priority and a bigger priority probably than winning.
I agree.
And I think
agree.
everyone wants to win. Everyone would love a championship.
But he would rather be a star.
I
He'd
think he
rather
might-
have his shoes sell. I agree.
I think that might be accurate.
And again, no offense to him.
Yeah. Well, hey, he wouldn't have
Like-
stayed in Cleveland. Now, you could say, well, he wouldn't stay in Cleveland if he wanted to be a star, and that's an indication that he's winning. Again, he has carte blanche there.
Yeah.
He has total control.
Right.
He gets to be a player where the expectations to actually win a title are not that high in Cleveland. If they don't win a title this year, despite finishing with the best record, no one's going to say, well, Donovan Mitchell's not a good player.
I know we're way over. Bradley Beal would have told you over and over and over again while he was in Washington that his priority was winning. I want to win here in our nation's capital for the Wizards.
Yeah.
But his priority was, I want to puff my stats as high as they can go because I want a supermax contract.
I want to take 25 shots a game and have nobody question it.
And the only people that can give me what I want are the Washington Wizards. So that is my priority. Yeah. And good for him.
Yeah, whatever your priority is, if you can get there, I guess that's good
But when
for
you go, well, I prioritize winning, I don't believe you. That's not true.
Yeah.
And so Quin Snyder might prioritize a lot of stuff, and winning might be nice, but I don't think that's his priority, no.
Might not be number one.
Stay tuned. More next. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Hey, bro. You hear us every day with our crazy opinions.
Hey, what you doing?
Well, now it's time to hear from you.
Hey, great show.
Download the KSL Sports app and fire off your thoughts with the call-in tab on the bottom of your screen.
Your show is fantastic. It's the one that captivates me the most.
You can tell PK to stop singing.
She bangs! She bangs!
Let Jake and Ben know what you really think of the Jazz. Tell Hans and Scotty about your favorite barbecue spot or what color of tie JJ should be wearing on TV. The best entries will be played on the air. Download the KSL Sports app now and hit the call-in button to let your voice be heard.
I think you guys do an incredible job.
This is 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. The sports you love, the teams you can't live without.
Get a sense of urgency!
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Two niggas on the airways, talking sports. They got him made Jake's and also loves his tie guy. Ben's got style with his scarf. Oh my. From the islands to the basketball courts.
Hi guys. Hey, I'd love to hear what you think about the Big 12 viewership numbers for the season, for the football season. You know what it says. There's a little talk going on social media about what does it mean? Did people really show up, to watch a great football team and then got disappointed? Is that going to come back and haunt them next year? Are numbers going to go down for Utah? Is it a lagging indicator? Are they going to show up in big numbers next year because ASU and BYU are going to be picked at the top? Do those two schools get like a big bump in their viewership? I'm curious to see what you guys think. Is it a lagging indicator or is it a leading indicator? Thanks.
Thanks for the call-in, Dave.
No,
you can
it is
do
an
that
interesting question.
on the KSL app. I'm trying to figure out exactly what he was asking.
I think at the end there he gets to it. Is a lagging indicator or a leading indicator? Essentially, like does
TV ratings for the entire conference for Utah?
I think he's talking specifically about Utah.
And they had good ratings this year, but I don't know. I haven't been keeping up to date on the Big 12 television ratings.
And Dave, I apologize if I'm misreading your question, but are you hurt by not having viewers? And is it going to have a trickle-down effect of if people aren't watching Utah, is it going to hurt the program? Versus if a lot of eyeballs are on your program, does that necessarily help you?
No, I don't think so. Not how people think anyway.
And I think you can look at, he brings up Colorado or brings up BYU now, and they are getting all this free advertising, and it's great for them, and players want to go play where there's free advertising. So that absolutely matters. And, Bill Belichick going to North Carolina, as much as people want to say they want to play for Bill, they want to play on TV, and Bill's teams are going to be on TV a lot, and that's going to help them. So it's a bit self-fulfilling.
I think it used to matter more than it does now.
I don't think anyone's ever tuned in to watch Utah football.
Ever.
And I don't mean that as a knock on Utah football.
They're just not a blue blood brand. They're not.
I don't think anyone has ever said, oh, Utah's on. I got to watch Utah, and I got to watch the way they play.
Yeah.
I do think, because I do this, I will say, oh, is there a number 14 next to their name? They're ranked? Well, they must be good, so I'm going to watch them play because they must be good. Versus, if Tulane has a little 11 next to their name, I'll watch a Tulane football game. If it doesn't exist there, I'm not going to waste my time watching Tulane football because it's not going to impact what the conversation is going to be at the end of the season. But Utah, if they have that number, and by the way, they regularly have that number because Kyle Whittingham's done a very good job, is going to keep them back in that, get them back in that situation.
Young people want to be on TV, so I'm not saying it has a non-impact. I just saying when you were making a decision where to play before, money wasn't a factor in theory. So you do things like exposure and how close to my parents and what kind of education am I going to get? What am I leaving out here? Where does my girlfriend want to go? I don't know. Now, none of that really carries any weight because you just want who's going to pay me the most. I mean, if I went to you, Ben, and said, now I'm not going to pay you anything, but we're on TV. You're like Notre Dame. We're on Channel 5. We're on KSL 5 every week. Well, you're going to go, okay, but Boise State's going to give me $10,000. You're going to Boise.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that stuff used to matter way more than it does now. I think Utah needs to win games to make it an attractive place to be, and then do they have the dough to retain and attract new players? I mean, I don't like it either, but I think that's the
name of the game.
I think that's it.
I think I found the genesis of this conversation, which somebody on Twitter named Booze Cougs tweeted out total TV viewership for 2024, which this is peak college football.
Uh-huh.
This is BYU 21.8 million, Utah 14.3 million. And this tweet has 26 retweets and 29 responses, which is a lot, including some guy, Taylor, who says, well, was Utah leading before BYU's bowl game? Seems pretty important to detail the difference. Like, this is key college football. People arguing.
I don't think that.
In fact, ESPN made the whole stupid commercial about, like, what's your graduation rate? What's all these things that don't actually matter for on the field product.
And this just in, because of the religious connection, BYU is going to have better ratings than Utah most, if not all of the time.
Yeah, right.
That's a nice built-in advantage for BYU. It's not really comparable.
And the truth is BYU was better than Utah this year, so more people are going to watch it.
Right. But yeah, do I think that's like overall impact on the program? Again, I don't think it matters.
Do I think it foretells the doom or success of BYU or Utah even as soon as next year?
No.
0%.
Yeah.
Like literally 0%.
So answering the question is no. Long-winded way to answer.
But I like the question, Dave.
Yeah, sure.
And
Thanks
I like
for sending it in. Yeah. Call in. The call-in feature on the KSLSports.com sports app. Excuse me. Hans and Scott here coming up next.
Thanks,
Talk to you
Christian.
tomorrow on 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone.